Everyone in the SAROA Hub webinar series. In today's invited talk, we have Dr. VVSS Sarma. So before I hand over the stage to Dr. Sarma, let me just introduce him to all. Dr. VVSS Sarma completed his master's degree in chemical oceanography from Andhra University, Visakhapatnam. Subsequently, he did his PhD research from CSIR-NIO and got awarded the degree from Goa University. He then joined NIO as a scientist and at present is a chief scientist and scientist in charge of CSIR-NIO Regional Center Visakhapatnam. He is also a professor of the Academy of Scientific and Innovative Research. Dr. Sarma's research interests include understanding the biogeochemical cycles of materials in the ocean and atmosphere, stable isotopes in the marine environment, oceanographic time series studies, chemical and biological sensor technology, and the impact of aerosols on the marine ecosystems. He is recipient of various fellowships, to name a few: researcher in the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, postdoctorate from Ministry of Education and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, France. He has been visiting professors in different universities in various countries, such as Université Pierre Marie Curie, Paris, France, Nagoya University, Japan. He is a guest faculty of the University of Hyderabad. He also serves as a board member for studies at Banaras Hindu University, Pondicherry University, and Andhra University. For his research work, he has received awards such as National Award on Excellence in Ocean Sciences and Technologies from Ministry of Earth Science in 2020. He is a fellow of Indian Academy of Sciences since 2015, a member of National Academy of Sciences since 2012, the ISCA Young Scientist Award by the Indian Science Congress in 2000, and the Start Young Scientist Award in 2000 by the American Geophysical Union. Dr. Sarma has published more than 215 publications and has more than 6,200 citations to his credit. With this brief introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Sarma to take over the session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amit, for your kind introduction to the group. Today, I will speak on the ocean acidification and mainly the role of aerosols, how it would change the acidification in the Northern Indian Ocean. Let me share my PPT. Amit, can you confirm that you can see the PPT?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible.
Yeah. Okay. Today I would like to present some of our recent results on the ocean acidification in the Northern Indian Ocean and the role of atmospheric pollutants. As you all know that in the carbon cycle, the emission, fossil fuel emission coming from the land is very important. That gives not only the gases, but also the particles, which have either acidic or the basic in the nature. In addition to that, there are the rivers, which are actually connecting the lithosphere with the hydrosphere. They also bring a lot of pollutant from the land into the ocean. They also modify the ocean acidification. Sorry. You know that the CO2, which is actually releasing the anthropogenic CO2, either through the fossil fuel conversion by the vehicular or the industries, in which 26% is taken up by the oceans, about 29% by the land, and 45% is being accumulated in the atmosphere. So this 26% is actually one of the reasons for the causing the ocean acidification. You know that the atmospheric CO2 is being increasing at the rate of about 1.5 to 2 microatmospheres per year. And this increase is not actually new. Even in the past, 800,000 years, actually atmosphere CO2 is getting oscillated. Sometimes it is increasing and the decreasing. But what is most important is that in the last 800,000 years, atmosphere CO2 never crossed 300 ppmv. But now it is now at present we have a 412 ppmv in the atmosphere, which has never happened in the Earth history for the past 800,000 years. That is actually causing the more important in the recent years, which is mainly caused by the anthropogenic sources. Now we say that about 30% of the anthropogenic CO2 is absorbed by the ocean. Is it really absorbed by the ocean? How will we able to know that? If you look at this plot, the red line is the fossil fuel emission leading to the increase of the atmospheric CO2. How much of the fossil fuel burned, so that would accumulate that much of the CO2 into the atmosphere if there are no oceans absorbing this CO2. But in the reality, what do you see in the atmosphere? This is the green line. This much of the CO2 is accumulating in the atmosphere. The difference of what it's supposed to be versus what you observe, this difference is removed by the both land and oceanic environment. Okay. This difference actually is variable depending on the El Nino and the La Nina conditions that changes the oceanic mixing. So that is why this difference you will get it. But nevertheless, if there are no oceans on the land, you should have the red line, this much of the CO2 you should have in the atmosphere. Now the absorbed CO2 by the ocean, what it happens is that the CO2 actually reacts with the oceanic waters and forms the carbonic acid that dissociates into and releases the proton to form as a bicarbonate or the carbonate. The released protons are the cause for the decrease of the pH. So this we call it as a ocean acidification. The long-term observations that were conducted at the various locations in the ocean. Now I'm giving the example here from the Hawaii Ocean Time Series, where the first time series observations were conducted in the atmosphere actually way back in late 1950s. This is called as a Keeling curve, where the atmospheric CO2 increase has been first time shown that. In the latter in the 1990s, they started actually measuring the oceanic the CO2 concentrations and as well as the pH, where they found that there is a decrease of the pH at the rate of 0.002 per year is actually decreasing the pH of the surface ocean. So, so using the RCP 2.6 or the 8.5 scenarios, they estimated that the decline may go to the 0.036 to the 0.042 by 2080 to 2100. By end of this century, this kind of a pH decline is anticipated using the RCP 2.6, whereas it is 0.28 to the 0.29 units if you take it to the RCP 8.5 scenarios. All these were based on increase of the atmospheric CO2 levels. If you look at the coastal ocean, actually the ocean acidification occurs actually beyond the CO2 level increase. Because the coastal oceans are influenced by the more of the human impacts through river discharges, maybe the natural phenomena caused by the upwellings, the coastal upwellings mainly. And the third and most important one is the atmospheric deposition of the pollutants. All these also contribute to the ocean acidification, in addition to the CO2 increase in the atmosphere. Now, if you look at the river discharge, not all rivers are basic, but not all rivers are acidic. If you look at in the Indian rivers, mainly the peninsular rivers, they're actually acidic in the nature. It is because most of our peninsular rivers in the India, they're the monsoonal rivers we also call. The monsoonal precipitation fills these rivers, and you know that the river water pH is somewhere like a 5.5 to the 6. So the discharge of this actually contains the pH of about 6.5. So we measure the pH of the estuaries, and I'm giving the one estuary, the Godavari in India, where during the peak discharge time, the pH goes down to the close to 6.5. That time, the estuarine PCOD goes to the more than 20,000 microatmospheres. So now, if this discharges into the coastal waters, so this estuary is somewhere here, you will find the lower pH here, but you have the higher pH in the northern side, which is influenced by the Ganges. The Ganges rivers are actually relatively basic in nature, which have about 8.2 pH. So the discharge, the region which is influenced by the Ganges may have the relatively higher pH, but those regions which are influenced by the peninsular rivers, they will have the relatively acidic pH. So therefore, depending on the what kind of rivers are discharging into the coastal ocean, that also modifies the coastal ocean pH. The other one is the upwelling. The upwelling, you know that the subsurface waters are relatively acidic. If you look at here, compared to the surface waters, upwelling brings the subsurface waters into the surface. So that also brings the acidic waters into the surface ocean. So therefore, upwelling also enhances the ocean acidification. The third and most important one is the anthropogenic aerosols. If you look at the global mean aerosol optical depth, which is taken from the MODIS satellite, you will find a thick aerosol optical depth over India and over China. That is where the highest aerosols you will find here. The color scale actually have the red in color is the higher aerosols, where the blue actually the lower aerosols. So these zones you have the very high aerosols. And if you look at their water soluble composition, 50% of these aerosols were contributed by the sulfates, followed by nitrates, and followed by the other composition, other chemicals like chloride, sodium, and so on. So therefore, these aerosols are mainly the anthropogenic. That's why you have the sulfates and the nitrate mainly coming from the coal combustion or maybe coming from the fossil fuel. So once these aerosols goes into the atmosphere and their deposition, either the dry deposition or the wet deposition, leading to formation of the sulfuric acid or the nitric acid, they will reduce the pH of the surface ocean. Then, this is actually during the different months. This is the spring inter monsoon, that is the March to the May. Summer monsoon, this is the June to July and August. And the fall inter monsoon is October and November. And this is the winter, which is the November to February. All the times, the dominant one is sulfate followed by nitrate. Now, you look at the satellite picture of the anthropogenic aerosol, which you can actually derive from the total aerosol optical depth given by the satellite. You see here in the Bay of Bengal, you see the coastal zones are highly influenced by the aerosols coming from the anthropogenic sources. What we noticed is that in the total aerosols coming from the dust and also the anthropogenic, 80% of the aerosols over the Bay of Bengal were contributed by the anthropogenic sources. The dust sources are much less, where the dust sources are relatively higher actually in the Arabian Sea side compared to the Bay of Bengal. So during the different periods of the months, always you have the aerosols in the coastal zone quite high, except in the monsoon time, when you have the precipitation, it removes the aerosols from the atmosphere. Then we try to see that at what rate these aerosols are increasing in the northwestern Bay of Bengal and the western coastal Bay of Bengal. The rate of increase is quite high. You see, we found that about the 0.1 aerosol units per decade, the aerosols are increasing between 2001 to 2019, which is much, much higher compared to that of what we have found elsewhere in the globe. You see that you find somewhere 0.076 or 0.069, and whereas in the African and other regions is 0.016 or 17. The so high amount of the aerosols are being produced here, the rate of increase of the aerosols are also much higher in this region, which is the highest over the globe. Then we made we started actually measuring the composition of the aerosols at our region, very, very close to the coast, where we found that not only the AOD is increasing, but even the total suspended solids are increasing, even sulfate concentrations are increasing, ammonium and the nitrate concentrations were also increasing in the past 1 decade. Okay. So even the contributions varies from the period to period. Like you see in the September to November, we have very high sulfates, even December to February. When you come to the March to May or June to August, the contribution of the sulfate was decreasing. It's depending on the wind, from where actually wind is blowing. Because during the March and the May and June, this period, the wind blows from the marine wind actually blows. So that brings relatively lower contribution of the sulfates. Then we try to look at the ionic balance in the aerosols. When you see that in any period of the time, in the summer monsoon or the fall inter monsoon or the winter monsoon, any of the time, the total anions are not completely neutralized by the cations. So that is why the dominant acidity is coming to these aerosols in the atmosphere. Then we try to look at how much this will have an influence on the pH of the coastal waters. What we did was that every week we collected the aerosols from the atmosphere. Then we take the coastal seawater, the filtered seawater. So we measured by dissolving this aerosols into the coastal waters, how much pH has been reduced. Here we are representing this. If 1 microgram per cubic meter of the aerosols were dissolved in 100 ml of the seawater, this much of the pH would decrease. You see here, during the fall intermonsoon and the winter time, the drop in pH is much more compared to that of the drop in pH during the spring or the monsoon time. Okay, so this is the time we have the more amount of the nitrates or the sulfates are coming, that resulting in the drop in more pH of the coastal water. So we made some kind of the mean estimation. During the winter time, the drop in pH was minus 0.022, and during the summer 0.011, and the spring is 0.007 on average drop in this region. Then we try to look at along the coast, at the east coast of India, how this imbalance is taking place and how it is impacting on the coastal water pH. Here the imbalance is much more. The Damra, which is actually close to the northwest coast of Bay of Bengal, the northern side. When you come down to the Chennai, which is actually southern side of the east coast of India. So all of them are showing the imbalance, where the anionic imbalance is much more in the northern side compared to the southern side. So that is why the drop in pH much higher in the northern side, but much smaller in the southern side. So which is actually relating to that of the sulfate and nitrate concentrations which are there from that zone, which is actually showing the very positive relation. Because the northern side, more of the biomass burning and related the aerosols entering from the Indian subcontinent. So that is why you have the more concentrations of the sulfates and the nitrate that actually drops the more amount of the pH in the coastal waters. So this is the interesting one. If you look at the coastal water salinity and the temperature, the Dhamra is the northern part of the Bay of Bengal, and Chennai is the southern part of the coastal Bay of Bengal. In the northern side, you will have the lower salinity mainly coming from the Ganges discharges, which are supposed to have the higher pH. Okay. We expect to decrease the pH. This is the line, which is actually the expected line of the pH. We should have the higher pH in the northern side. That should have been decreased into the southern side because the decreased influence of the salinity. But what we find is that there's no much difference in the salinity if you take into the error bars into the consideration. It is because in the northern side, more amount of the aerosols are coming. Their deposition is decreasing the pH down. The aerosol actually concentration is much lower in the southern side, not so much is influencing the coastal water pH. So therefore, this kind of the gradient supposed to exist in the pH that has been nullified because of the higher amount of the deposition of the aerosol in the northern coastal Bay of Bengal. Then we try to look at the time series of the coastal aerosols. Here is actually in 2019, actually we did this experiment. Every month we collected the aerosol composition. We had the total suspended particles. This is the nitrate concentration, this is the sulfate, and this is the phosphate. And then every month we dissolve this into the coastal waters and try to see how much of the pH is being changing for 1 microgram per cubic meter of the TSP in 100 ml of the water. So it shows that 0.02 to 0.08 of the pH could decrease if you dissolve the 1 microgram per cubic meter of the TSP in 100 ml of the seawater. Then we have a long time series observation that are being conducted in 2007 to the present, but I'm showing here until the 2019 in the coastal Bay of Bengal. What we seen from this time series was that the decrease of the pH very close to the coast, that means 10 kilometers from the coast, was 0.007 per year of the pH decrease. If you go offshore, that is about the 30 kilometers from the coast, which is 0.004. Even these two were quite away from what we see in the open ocean regions of the similar latitudinal belt, which is 0.002, which I have shown in the very beginning of my presentation. That means in the coastal regions, at least the 2 to 3 times higher rate of the acidification is taking place in the coastal Bay of Bengal compared to the same latitude in the open ocean regions. Okay, in which we try to separate the contributions by the different drivers, in which the aerosol contribution coming close to the 33% of this acidification is contributed by the aerosols. Then we try to see that the entire Bay of Bengal, how it is being happening here. So we have a lot of data collected during the different periods of the payback from the 1991 to the present. So based on this data, we made the multiple regression equations using the satellite temperature, salinity, and chlorophyll. We try to recalculate the pH in this region for the period of 1998 to the present. So based on this, we try to calculate the trends in pH in this region for the different periods like a winter, spring, and summer and fall. This is the color, actually the red in color shows the increase in pH, blue in color shows the decrease in pH. What we seen was that in the Western Bay of Bengal, where the pH is decreasing, especially much more during the spring, to some extent in the winter, and also in the fall, where the other regions, pH is increasing here, which is actually contrary to the what typically happening elsewhere in the globe. So the lines which are with black in color, which is actually significant at 90% confidence interval of the trends, where the other regions where there is no black line, the trends are not significant. Why pH is increasing here is that the salinity is actually decreasing in this region, even based on the satellite measured salinities or the model salinities, even the observations based salinities were also decreasing in this region. That may be caused by the melting of the Himalayan glaciers, which are actually increasing the discharge of the Ganges and the Brahmaputra discharges. Since Ganges and Brahmaputra rivers have the relatively higher pH, that is maybe the causing for the increase of the pH in these regions. Where in the western region, which is dominated by the aerosol depositions, where the faster rate of increase in the aerosol optical depth have been noticed, that is where the decrease in the pH has been noticed in these regions. Then the aerosols not only decrease the pH, but also have an influence on the warming rates, and also have an influence on the primary productions in addition to the pH changes. This is a very good paper actually by the Dong et al. In 2014, where they have shown that if there are no aerosols, you should have a warming something like this. Very high warming you should have by the greenhouse gases alone. But the dust, which actually cools the lower atmospheric temperatures, because the incoming solar radiation will be blocked by them. Okay, they estimated that in the Bay of Bengal, there will be a cooling by the aerosols is much higher in the Bay of Bengal even compared to the other part of the northern Indian Ocean, because that is where the high amount of the aerosols are being produced. Then we try to see how the anthropogenic aerosols have been spread around. You can see that in the coastal zone of the Bay of Bengal, in all the months, from the January to the December, you always have high amount of the aerosols, except during the monsoon time when we have a precipitation. Now we look at the warming trends in the Bay of in the northern Indian Ocean, where you have the black line is there, that is where the significant warming is taking place. Otherwise, these zones, the warming is not significant at 90% confidence interval. You see here in the northern Arabian Sea and also in the Bay of Bengal, during the winter period, this is December, January, February, there no significant warming is happening here for the between 1998 to the 2018. Similarly, in the springtime, this zone in the Bay of Bengal, you have no significant warming, and in the fall monsoon, and also in the Arabian Sea during the fall monsoon in this region, that is where aerosols are very high here. So they are masking, they are actually decreasing the incoming solar radiation, where the warming is not as high as what you will see in the southern regions. This changes even the physics of the ocean. Like you have the cooling in the atmosphere and the warming, and you have the relatively higher temperature of the sea surface temperature. That changes that increases the gradient between seawater temperature and atmospheric temperature. You see here in the 1979 to the 1993, we have the more the difference in the atmospheric temperature and the seawater temperature compared to the recent one. I will show you the time series here. You see here, this is the atmospheric temperature. It was warming quite rapidly until 1994. And then this is not so much. This is actually air above the sea surface. Okay. Where in the sea surface warming, you see that the warming is much higher, but not so much actually in the recent years in the northern Arabian Sea. So the delta, if you take, the delta is actually much higher. The slope is 0.1 degrees per decade, but it is much lower. It's almost off in the past, before 1993. Because 1994 onwards, we have the more industrialized impacts actually you will see in the Indian subcontinent. So that is the time the aerosols were increasing very fast here. Even you see here between the 2001 to the 2019, because that is the time the data is available. So you can see the rapid increase of the aerosol increase in the atmosphere. So that was actually decreasing the atmospheric temperature. This is triggering the winter convective mixing in the Arabian Sea. So leading to input of the subsurface waters into the surface, where the low pH waters are coming into the surface. So now, in addition to that, when the aerosols are increasing, they are also injecting the nitrates into the ocean. So this actually we estimated how much of the nitrate, like in a milligram nitrogen per square meter per day, is being deposited into the surface ocean. So here two things are happening. The cooling of the atmospheric temperatures because of the aerosols input into the atmosphere, that is decreasing the solar radiation. That is actually increasing the convective mixing, which is bringing the low pH waters. Whereas aerosols are also giving the nutrients that increases the primary production. Primary production increases the pH. Okay. The balance between these two, that determines how much of the aerosols are giving the reducing the or increasing the pH of the waters in the northern Indian Ocean. We are trying to do this kind of a balance using the different calculations, are actually it is being undergoing, not yet seen that how much total impact on the aerosols and the pH in this region. Whereas what you can see here is that you see here you have a relatively less warming is taking place, where we have the high amount of the anthropogenic AOD you have. If you look at the chlorophyll, there is an increase in chlorophyll has been seen. But if you look at the net primary production, it is actually not showing any kind of trends. What we expect is that if there is a warming is taking place, the vertical mixing is going to be reduced. We will have the less input of the nutrient from the subsurface waters. We can expect decrease in the primary production. But here, the decrease has been seen in the southern side, but not here. So that means the decrease of the nutrient coming from the subsurface waters may be compensated by the nutrients coming from the aerosols. So therefore, there are no significant trends in the primary production in this region. The other important one with the ocean acidification is about the calcium carbonate secreting organisms. You know, in the OA, when the ocean acidification increases, the calcium carbonate precipitation decreases and the dissolution actually increases. Then that will have an impact not only in the calcium carbonate secreting organisms like the coccolithophores or the forams or the pteropods, but also have an impact on the coral reefs, which we have many of the regions in the Indian Ocean, we have the coral reefs in this. So it will have an impact on their dissolution. It is because the anthropogenic CO2 is accumulating in the ocean. You see here, this is Atlantic and Pacific and the Indian Ocean, where the anthropogenic CO2 accumulation in this region. In the northern region, up to 1,000 meters, anthropogenic carbon dioxide is accumulated. If you go down to the 40 degrees south, it will go down to the even 1,500 meters. This accumulation is taking place. Now, this will have an impact on the aragonite or the calcite saturation depth, because the calcium carbonate forms either in the form of the aragonite or in the form of the calcite. The aragonite forms are very sensible to the pH, okay, whereas the calcite is not that much sensible. So aragonite saturation depth at present is at the depth of about less than 500 meters depth, around 400, 450 meters depth existing there. That means below this depth, the aragonite form of the calcium carbonate cannot exist. It will dissolve. Okay, so whereas the calisite is much deeper, somewhere about the more than 3,000, 3,500 meters depth. So therefore, calisite can able to sustain such a deeper depth. The model shows that even the 2095 or the end of this century, the surface water aragonite saturation depth is close to the 2. That means less than 1 actually is the under saturation takes place. The models are showing that aragonite is not going to be saturated in the surface waters by end of this century by the models. But let us look at the reality, what is happening. This is the data, aragonite saturation depth data available between 1994 to the 2022. This is based on the measurements. What it shows is that aragonite saturation is much shallower in the Bay of Bengal, which is close to the 250 meters, around to 280 meters, wherein the Bay of Bengal is around 400 meters. In the southern Indian Ocean, it is around close to the even 800 to the 1,000 meters depth. Based on the repeat hydrography, there is a certain zones like this transect. These 4 transects have been repeatedly measured by the World Ocean Circulation Experimental by the US during 1994, 2003, 2013, sometime 2018. They repeatedly measured the inorganic carbon system in the water column. They found that based on this data, we reanalyzed and found that the aragonite saturation depth is shallowing on average at the rate of 10 meters per year, which is very serious in this region. The rate of shallowing depth is the 10 meters. Now, at the moment, the Bay of Bengal has a aragonite saturation at 280 meters depth in 2022. If the shallowing rate of the 10 meters continues in the future, in another 28 to the 30 years, the aragonite saturation will come to the surface. That means there are no aragonite form of the calcium carbonate secreting organisms can able to survive in the Bay of Bengal. So it is predicted that based on this business as usual scenario, by 2050, aragonite saturation depth in the Bay of Bengal may come to the surface. It is because the rapid acidification that is taking place in the Bay of Bengal, both due to the CO2 as well as due to the deposition of the acidic pollutants from the atmosphere. Whereas in the Arabian Sea, maybe the saturation will come by end of this century, if business as usual scenario continues in these regions. But models could not be able to project this kind of saturations. It is because many of the global models could not be able to reproduce inorganic carbon system in the Indian Ocean. This is actually the model comparisons we have done under the part of the IPCC. They were asked to look at how the models are reproducing with reference to the observed data in the Indian Ocean. Actually, I'm representing for the Indian Ocean, but the similar things are being done for the Pacific and Atlantic and also Southern Ocean. What we found that none of the global, including some of the regional models, are actually not able to do the good mixing. Mainly the monsoon mixing is very weaker in these models. There is no atmospheric inputs in these models. And river discharge is very important in the Indian Ocean, mainly for the Bay of Bengal. There are no real-time river discharge data, and its characteristics are part of these models. So that is why they could not able to reproduce the real scenarios by the global or the regional models, which actually we are publishing now, coming soon into the global biogeochemical cycles. So therefore, I will summarize my talk here by saying that about the 80% of the aerosols over the northern Indian Ocean were contributed by the anthropogenic sources, and the rate of the increase of the aerosols over this region is the highest over the globe. The anthropogenic aerosols playing a significant role in the ocean acidification and also the primary production to some extent. because of deposition of the nitrates and the phosphates. The aragonite saturation depth is shallowing very rapidly in this region due to the rapid acidification. The models could not able to simulate the inorganic carbon system due to lack of aerosols and the weak monsoon mixing and the real-time river discharges in the models. And the models must be improved by including these processes for the precise the projections of the future changes in the Indian Ocean. Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions from you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarma. I would open the floor for the questions. If any participants are having any questions, please ask either in the chat box or you can raise the hand. I will unmute you.